Hi, my name is Chris Boteet. I want to walk through a couple of different items for people that might be new to SharePoint as an information management system and some of the things they introduce as a paradigm to classify and understand information. And this came about, number one, because I was asked one of my most controversial posts about folders in SharePoint and why particularly I think that they are inadequate and should be not used as much as they tend to be in file shares. And secondly, I went out and started looking, figuring someone out there might surely have an example of why using metadata-driven design and using the features in SharePoint 2010 in particular are better than just using the straight folder paradigm without any custom metadata. So someone could see visually the importance of using it, but I couldn't find it anywhere. So hopefully this will serve the purpose of augmenting some of my case that I mentioned in the earlier post, as well as going over some other things that might help other people as they look through and they think through about using SharePoint as an information management tool and maximizing the things available to you. So what I have here is I have two document libraries inside of my virtual machine that we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about Forms and Forms 2. And both of these document libraries have the same amount of content in them. They both have the same amount of documents. I think it's less than 10. But the two different libraries have two different approaches to them. One of which is what you're probably more familiar with, only has the out-of-the-box content type on it, called document, and it only uses folders and doesn't apply any custom metadata with a custom content type. So basically what someone has done is this would be someone who did not understand some of the tools available in SharePoint. They came in and they went on their merry way uploading and using documents the same way they did on the file share. Now, while you're going to get some benefits like versioning and collaboration and less document duplication, you're not really maximizing the functionality provided to you by SharePoint completely out of the box. And this is regardless of whether you're on Foundation or whether you're using Server. So let's talk about this. Now remember, this is a small example because it's around 10 documents. Doesn't have a ton of folders in it. It's a small example. So you might look at this example with an eye and say, well, this isn't too bad. But remember, this is only a small example of what I've seen of hundreds and hundreds of folders. And so the problem gets exponentially worse as the amount of folders and documents increases inside of a library. So let's talk about a couple different things here. So I have a couple different folders, again, a small example, ITHR forms. Now, here's the problem with folders as a paradigm. When computers were originally created in the personal computer realm, that we needed a way, in user experience terminology, it's called translating realism into a new interface. So the original designers of computers, the PC-based software, whether that be Apple or Microsoft, they both brought over the idea of a folder because many people in their office environments or at home use file folders. So they were familiar with the paradigm of having a separate section of the file management cabinet and the individual folders that they could put them in and classify them with tabs, which is the same thing as a title or a name for a folder now. And they brought that paradigm over because it would make sense. Now that was great 20 years ago, but the problem is that now in 2011 our information management needs have grown exponentially. Not only our needs, but the types of information that we're gathering and working on. As the technology has become more sophisticated, so have our categorization needs, and our expectations as users have also gone up likewise. So we need a new tool and a new approach. Now there are many different tools out there, both in the desktop and server realm, to give you different approaches to managing information. But obviously, in this blog, we're concerned specifically with SharePoint, and it's probably the one that most of you are familiar with in an enterprise type of setting that you're deploying. So let's talk about this. So I've got two folders. Now you'll see the problem, like I mentioned with file folders as a paradigm, is that it isolates documents as to only living in one specific location. In the old paradigm, you couldn't live in multiple file folders unless you copied it and you duplicated it manually to the different file folders, which wasn't an efficient way to do it. Now, the same thing translates into a digital realm, that when you put something inside of a folder, it can't exist inside of another folder. So inherently, it shows a problem of categorization right off the bat. Now, my problem with folders isn't necessarily just top-level folders. So I can't go to I can go into a library, see there are 8 folders, at a glance, look at the labels, understand what's inside of them. My problem with folders isn't necessarily at that level, even though I still think it's less than optimal and less than sufficient. That's not where the problem really starts. The problem really starts when we start nesting folders. And if any of you have ever tried to browse someone else's My Documents to try and find something, you know it's difficult. Now, of course, it's not difficult for the person browsing the information because they're familiar with the labels, they know where something is at. But I'll be honest, even in my own folder structures that I have on my local computer, I still struggle remembering where things are at because they're nested so deeply. I have to go, and it's frustrating. And I wish the desktop paradigm would grow as quickly as what Microsoft is doing with the server paradigm and bringing you different information categorization needs. And maybe we'll see more out of that in Windows 8. I hope so. So as you can see, HR forms and IT forms also have a few subfolders inside them. Benefits, new employee, and retirements forms, and each of them have a couple of documents inside of them. Now, this is just a few folders, but as you come in here, if someone is not familiar with this, they don't know at a glance what is actually underneath qualitatively each of these different folders. They have to navigate into them. And as these folders get larger and larger, not only in terms of the documents, but what is nested underneath them. Now these only have 2 levels in a folder structure underneath them. So it's not very deep. But again, as you remember, this breadcrumb, which shows the logical navigation back to the top, can get deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper. And I wouldn't be surprised to go in some SharePoint environments where people weren't using this and see this breadcrumb just go way out down here. That wouldn't surprise me at all. And it's a problem. It's a problem for findability, common term to use to find information and utilize it effectively. And it's also a problem of management. Trying to find your way around them can just become a really difficult thing to manage over time. So here is one paradigm to approaching information management. I come to my folders, don't use any custom metadata, use just upload my documents to the default document content type. But as this grows and grows, it's going to be a larger and larger problem. So imagine here there are 50 folders, and underneath them 500 more. I can just imagine. I've seen some really off the top folder structures that are very difficult to navigate. So instead, SharePoint provides us a couple tools. First is the ability to create multiple document libraries, so we can categorize them qualitatively by a different title, by their content. So I can separate forms from policies, for instance, or any other number of different types of ways I want to break up the information, as well as allowing me to apply content types and metadata, and the two go together to allow us robust content classification. Let's look at the forms library. Now, as we come to this library, we're going to notice something different. First of all, we're going to notice is that there's a lot more in this view that I've modified. I modified the default documents view. We see we have some additional metadata here, and these two, area and country, are both managed metadata. So there's more about that if you want to look more into that. It's just a way provided in 2010, a robust way to manage an enterprise-grade taxonomy, as well as I have a custom content for SME, or subject matter expert, and I only have 2 accounts in my VMAD here. And then we of course get many out-of-the-box columns such as modified, modified by, created, created by, and you can choose whether you want to show those or not. Similar as you get into NTFS. So let's look at some of the advantages that this has. Now you look at, I don't have folder structures here, and it can look first as saying, wow, I don't really know how I want to really look at this information. It seems like at first glance the folders are a more robust way to categorize them. Well, in reality, when we look at this, the additional metadata gives us some additional flexibility. Let's look first at the metadata that I mentioned, the interface that they're given in a dialog. So you'll see that there is not only 2 different content types, HR and IT forms, but there are also name, which you get, and title as well when you inherit from the out-of-the-box content type, plus my custom ones, country, and I have a few countries in here. That's a multi-value select one. And then area, is just a couple of different areas that the form could apply to. And I can go much more granular. I can separate benefits down into retirement and all the different types of other different forms I have. Just for our example, we're going to keep it simple. And then I have my SME form here as well. So that's the experience and interface that I get of using that. Now I have all my documents here, but because I have this metadata classified, now I can drill into it through two different ways. The first is through views. So I have a couple of views up here, and views allow us to do a bunch of different things. Let's look at one example. Let's say I wanted to look at just the HR forms and by the area metadata field that I specified. So let's change this view. So now we'll see something different. We'll notice that now it's trimmed to just show me the forms that are relevant to HR, and they're using a SharePoint paradigm to group them by a metadata field, so I can look and expand these. And it's a more robust way of the folder paradigm, if you can say, grouping. And it allows me to expand and contract them and not have the findability problems of having lots of nested ones. And I'm not going to get into a lot of how I modified these views, but the ability to modify views, and maybe I should do another screencast specifically on all the different features in here. I can come in and turn off all these different columns that I have here, any custom ones. I can change the ordering of them. I can come in here and sort them by whatever I want, by name, modified date, so I can have different sorts. I can filter them. You'll notice that I am only showing ones that are tagged with the HR form content type, so it's not going to show the IT ones. I can turn on lots of different features, but I also have group by turned on, and by that column area I have them grouped by. So it gives me a more dynamic way to look at them. So let's go back. We looked at HR forms by area. I have another one, IT forms by SME. When we come in here, we notice these are filtered to just IT forms, and now instead of being grouped by area, they're grouped by the actual SME that was specified when I put in the user. Now, I cannot group in SharePoint 2010, at least from what I can see, on multi-value select manage metadata fields. So you'll see that these forms are tagged with both England and France or USA and Germany. So I cannot group them by, unfortunately, all England forms, I assume, because they would be duplicated in the view. But that's not the end of it. In SharePoint 2010, we have some additional functionality. We have metadata navigation, which has replaced a couple different areas of functionality I'm just not going to get into for the scope of this. But I at least want to show you what is available to you. This allows you, and let's turn back on all our documents, to not only filter by different areas, but also by using the metadata that's tagged or the content type, I can choose what I want to look at. So let's say I want to look at all forms that are tagged with England. So I hit England, and it's going to give me all of them. Now this is going to show me HR as well as IT ones, and I can filter them further and come in and just show me HR forms, and it's going to trim the view. Now I can also clear these filters, come down here and change them by content type. So now instead of that folder paradigm, even though it shows folder here, it does by default, even though I have folders turned off for this library. So that would be another oddity in the SharePoint interface. But I can come in here and just look at IT forms. Instead of having the necessity of the folder structure, I can come here and see all of them and continue to filter them more. Much more robust way of looking at our information by using filters. And the SharePoint 2010 search interface duplicates this in a certain way by using facets that allows me to dial in more into my information. Now, I can come down here and look at a couple other different things. Let's say I want to come in and look at only documents that are tagged with benefits, and I can filter them similarly to the way that I did above and apply. So this is the similar way to do that. So this kind of duplicates what was done up here, which is just another way to do it, and I can do multi-value selects inside of there. I can look at who it's checked out to. I can choose the country. I can even do date filters. Now remember, I can do these in views as well, but instead of having to create views, personal or public, I can come in here and just do this myself dynamically on the fly and choose the date that I want to filter by. I can do created, modified, even down to SME. So I can clear this, come down here to SME, and say I only want ones that are done by Chris, and apply that, and my document library is going to refresh and show me ones that are only tagged with that, but I still have my IT form in here. Turn on. If I turn that off and refilter, I'm going to get more documents. So this is a way in 2010 using our custom metadata to go in and look at a much more robust way to think about and use our information inside of SharePoint. Now, there are many different approaches to this. Now, and also the custom metadata you're going to be using is going to be defined by either a consultant who is versed in content analysis and taxonomy design, or someone even internally that has an understanding of your content management needs. Now, there are two other caveats that are worth talking about. It would be nice to end the video here and say this is definitively two extremes that you have. You either have folders and no metadata, or you have all metadata and no folders. But in reality, that's not the way that actually works. So in reality, we can combine the two of them. I can go into my forms library and turn on additional content types if I wanted to. So I can add my IT form and add them all in here. I can categorize them. Let me just go ahead and look. So I've got my HR form. Let me add my IT form to this as well. And I have my IT and my HR form in here as well. So I can add content types and I can categorize them inside of these folders. So I can come in here in my new hire forms. I can edit these properties once I change the content type to IT form. I'm going to get all my metadata that I can come in here. Let's just go ahead and save that as well. And I can also come in my library settings and turn on my metadata navigation settings. This is going to show you the different options you can choose. Let's go ahead and just choose country right now. Remove this folders. And then choose area or other ones that I want to filter on. We'll leave that there as fine. And we can duplicate what came out over here. We go back to our forms library. And I can come in here and look at all the ones that are just tagged with USA. So I can do that similarly as well. Now there's another thing you can do as well. I have in here, let's go back to all documents, clear our filter. You can also inside of a view turn off folders. So I've created a view that if I click no folders, it's going to look similarly like I did out of the with these default forms library without all the custom metadata, of course. And this ability was available in SharePoint 2007 as well as 2010. If I come down here to folders, I'm going to get a couple different options. I can, in this view, show all items outside of folders, so it's going to show me them. See the folders versus flat option. And in this view, I'm going to show everything in all folders, in only the top level folders, or only in folders of a certain content type, which is the only one folders. So I can choose to show or not show forms inside of a document library. So this, you might look at this. One other thing to show you, in SharePoint 2010, you can also do something called folder inheritance. So I can metadata inheritance inside of a folder. So if I click the benefits form, I can actually specify what type of metadata is automatically applied to the document when I use a folder. So if I upload this document into the benefits form, it's going to automatically be tagged with benefits with a default value. And the user can change that, but it can automatically be tagged there. So that's other functionality. So you might be wondering, well, which is really the best paradigm? Now, even though I've showed you in views you can remove folders and you can still have metadata navigation, you can even have metadata inheritance inside of folders, why then, Chris, would I not then just drag all my folders and just categorize them after the fact? The plain fact of the matter is that at the end of the day, folders are a paradigm that has long outlived its usefulness and functionality in terms of content categorization and classification. And SharePoint is a particular way for us to deploy a new tool inside of our enterprise and change the culture in which we approach thinking about information management, particularly how we classify information. So even though I technically can still remain and have folders, my encouragement to you is that as you move away from the traditional file share or maybe another web-based information management tool into SharePoint, that you train and educate users that folders are a less than optimal way to manage information, and they open problems. So, and most people do not tread the line between using folders in a smart way or using folders completely in the wrong way. Usually people just use folders the way they always have, coming from a file share. So if you're going to use them, train them, users, how to configure them, how to understand how to use them, how views work. But I would encourage you, again, I'm going to reiterate this, that you show them a better, more powerful, and flexible way to categorize your information without folders. So instead of having to rely on folders and then creating custom views and stuff to remove them, just say we're going to take an approach to our information management where we're going to remove our dependency upon them. Now the only other thing that I could think that Forms jumps out at me as a possibility is security, that allows you the ability to define security at a folder level inside of a library. Now I'm going to also encourage you to not use this as well. Much like using individual item permissions, in SharePoint I can come down to an individual document. Let's say I come down to this new user form, and I can actually manage permissions on this that are by default inherited from the library and all the way on up. As you can see, it's inheriting permissions all the way from the top of the internet. I can stop inheriting permissions and break this and customize it at a document level, and you can do it as a folder level as well. But again, remember, only in extreme circumstances should that be considered, because as the number of folders grow and you apply custom non-inherited security to folders, the mess becomes exponentially more of a problem. So remember, my example was small. My sample set was small as well. But as you can imagine, as these grow more in any type of organization, the folders become almost unwieldy as you have more and more of them. They become more and more nested. Why not come in and responsibly teach them the tools that are provided by SharePoint to move away from that paradigm to a more robust one? Using content types with custom metadata, using metadata filtering and custom views, you can have a much more robust and usable and findable way to approach your information instead of just using folders inside of SharePoint. Now I've given you the caveats back and forth on both sides, folders, not folders. Now there is another way that SharePoint provides in 2010, a midway between the two that I'm not going to demonstrate. It's called the document set. Now, I'll link it in this post to a blog post done by my friend, done on what document sets are. And they are an interesting and robust way. Notice document sets cannot be nested. I can't put a document set in another document set, which I said in folders, the problem is when you start nesting folders. So the idea of having one top level document set and grouping them, and even though it's conceptually a similar way approach to folders, it's very different. And it's also a much more robust way. But the problem with document sets in SharePoint 2010 is there's a hard limit of 50 megabytes to each document set. And most people aren't going to be able to do this. One last objection I think that people are going to have about using folders is throttling. And people say, if I have tens of thousands of documents, then I need to use folders to throttle them. And in 2007, to a point that was a reasonable argument. I don't want to show 10,000 documents. But also inside of views, I can choose inside of a view how many I actually want to show. So if I come down to item limit, I can choose to throttle and only show a certain amount and then paginate through all of my other documents as well. So that's another thing to keep in mind. Don't buy into someone saying folders, you need them to increase performance, because that's not the case. You can do them responsibly with views as well. So I know that was a lot of information, a lot back and forth. Hopefully I've shown you some of the functionality in 2010 that provides you more robust classification tools, and given you a way to think about possibly moving away from the folder paradigm that you're used to in a file share and use something much more usable and more robust. And even though your users might respond quickly to them, and they might have a gut reaction that says, I don't like that, over time I've seen great success in adoption, especially as people see the benefits of increased search result accuracy, the ability to navigate a site and site collections more accurately with well-defined libraries and lists and all the content types inside of them using metadata navigation and other tools. you're going to find a lot more success than trying to just stick with an old, antiquated paradigm, even though SharePoint provides you the ability to do that. So hopefully you learned a lot. Ask me questions below in the comments if you want me to cover something more specifically, but hopefully it gives you a good overview of what's available to you in SharePoint, particularly in SharePoint 2010.